Welcome to Mrs. True Crime. Today's video is an in-depth look into part of the Milwaukee sex trafficking activity. It's a tale of coercion and abuse. If you are triggered by anything dealing with sexual acts, feel free to click off this video. Perhaps check out a horse video for some lighthearted content. If not, I'm Nicole. Let's get started. They are our sisters, nieces, cousins, girls as young as 14 with dreams of security, freedom, or stardom twirling in their heads. They run away from a home that was built to protect them into the arms of a man who promises the world only to be filled with lies, bruises, and emotional vulnerability. PolarisProject.org describes human trafficking as, quote, the business of stealing freedom for profit, unquote. There are two kinds of trafficking, sex and labor. Sex trafficking is by far the most understood or discussed. In 2017, though Polaris Project says the numbers are only a fraction of an underreported crime, there were 10,615 individual victims, 8,759 trafficking cases, and 1,698 trafficking businesses. Their map highlights a striking phenomenon in the Northeast, East, and South coast of America. But what state or city has the highest ranking? Honestly, does it matter? Being ranked as highest in sex trafficking isn't an honor, no matter how it's spun. But in 2014, U.S. Rep. Gwen Moore addressed the House floor to sway a bill aimed at helping underage victims of trafficking by saying, quote, I regret to report that my own hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin has become known as a sex trafficking hub for both children and adults. As a matter of fact, the FBI reports that Milwaukee has the second highest in the nation for recovered youth, unquote. Technically, she wasn't wrong. According to PolitiFact.com, the FBI announced in July 2013 that over the course of 3 days in 76 cities, they arrested 153 pimps and identified over 105 sexually exploited children. Of those children, Milwaukee tied with Detroit for the second highest of children recovered at 10. The first was San Francisco with 12. While Moore was right based on reports, she was wrong in the details. Each report and claim differs in numbers, including states and cities. Furthermore, it's hard to track per city because the crimes are heavily underreported. However, Moore had a point of bringing up her hometown. JSOnline.com writes that 340 young adults and children were exploited over the span of 4 years in Milwaukee. This expands a 2013 study that found 77 children, primarily African American girls 12 to 17, as victims spanning 2 years. These reports embarked on many high-profile pimp and trafficking cases, starting with father-son duo Todd King Tut Carter and Nicholas Harrison. In January 2009, then 39-year-old Carter and then 19-year-old Harrison were charged with recruiting 6 young teenage girls into prostitution across 4 states, starting back in March 2008. Some of the young girls were introduced into the business through Harrison, who dated them prior to their involvement in sex work. Carter explained that he used Harrison because of his closeness in age to the victims. Once the girls were introduced into the world, the pair would have sex with them. Carter called it training, supplied them with condoms for their dates, told them how to discover undercover police, and chauffeured them to other states for business. For advertisement purposes, they took nude photos of the girls and posted them on Craigslist. Though it appeared the two were a solid team, Harrison would be beneficial in bringing his father to justice. He worked with prosecutors, supplying crucial information implementing his father in the ordeal. In February 2009, Carter pled guilty to conspiracy and child trafficking, foregoing a trial. At their hearing, one woman, Charlotte M., testified about the change her granddaughter went under the thumb of Carter and son. Charlotte said she spent weeks trying to locate her granddaughter, and even once she was found, the young girl wasn't the same. The, quote, respectful, vivacious 16-year-old, unquote, was now 18 and a shipper, refusing advice and comfort from her family. The guilty plea was supposed to give the victims and their families peace of mind, but the scars were already too fresh. Chief U.S. District Judge Charles N. Clevert said to Carter, quote, "You've adversely affected the minds, ambitions, and very being of the victims," unquote. The judge's disgust and shock of Carter's trafficking pressed on when he discovered he didn't use the profits to pay down his staggering backlog of child support owed towards his 16-plus children, one of which he fathered with a victim. Carter apologized for his wrongdoing and claimed that he understood now the, quote, "psychological and emotional damage he caused," unquote. Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Wall aimed for a 30-year sentence, but in mid-2010, Todd Carter was sentenced to 25 years. As for Nicholas Harrison, he pled guilty to one count of sex trafficking a child. In his plea deal, Harrison admitted to harboring his 16-year-old girlfriend who needed a place to live in March 2008. In lieu of rent, Carter suggested prostitution, which Harrison supported. The 16-year-old occupied 50 to 60 dates from April to May 2008, giving all the money to Harrison. She was photographed nude and posted on Craigslist for sexual advertisement. Harrison faced 10 years in prison, but was given only 6 in 2010. The next to be charged was then 30-year-old Tyrone H.K. McMillan. In August 2011, McMillan was charged with sex trafficking 3 minors between 2006 and 2008. Additional charges were added to include 2 more women, one of whom was an adult. The 4 minors testified that McMillan supplied them with fake IDs, posted sexual advertisements of them on Craigslist, made them call him daddy, and demanded all of their earnings. A minor identified only as Cherish detailed her involvement with McMillan. She states she met him through her best friend Jasmine on July 4, 2007. Cherish was impressed with him. He was charming and handsome and, quote, "had a lot of things going on. He had a nice car, he was rapping and stuff," unquote. He was also sweet to her, promising a car in her own place, and after 11 days she was producing money for him at a Minneapolis strip club. Cherish supplied McMillan $500 to $600 per night and moved into his Brown Deer home with Jasmine and an older woman named Jessica, both of whom were sex workers. Jasmine was once caught by police, and to avoid detection, McMillan and Cherish drove away, but were eventually stopped. Cherish testified that she gave a fake name, but when police threatened her with jail, she confessed her name and age. This is when McMillan learned she was 16. Yet, he refused to let her leave. After months of working for McMillan, Cherish mustered the courage to leave by claiming she was pregnant. He demanded she take a pregnancy test in his presence, striking her when she refused, but Cherish fought back. She hit him, yelled, and eventually walked out the door. Cherish wasn't pregnant. She states she never even went on any dates for McMillan. In his court hearing, McMillan said that the women made their own choices, that he only took hold of their money upon their request to have him manage it for them. He claims he never hit them, or knew they were younger than 18. Prosecutors believed he was lying. Perhaps hoping for a mistrial or an acquittal, one of McMillan's men attempted to help the trial. It didn't exactly go as planned. In the early morning of June 14, 2013, 35-year-old Kyle Collins physically assaulted and threatened one of the 4 minors who testified against McMillan. He confronted her inside of a nightclub, told her he knew she testified against McMillan, but she left, only to be confronted once again. He grabbed her and began to punch and choke her, then proceeded to drag her by her hair towards an awaiting car, stating, quote, "I'm going to kill this snitch," unquote. Her hair extension ripped from her hair, giving the victim time to break free and escape. With the witness statements from the woman and 2 other individuals, Collins was arrested sometime later. He was indicted on 1 count of retaliation against a federal witness and faced life in prison without parole. I am unsure of his jail status at this time. Still, Collins' stunt didn't halt McMillan's trial or conviction. His conviction included 4 minors. He was acquitted on 1 charge. After 5 hours of deliberation, Tyrone McMillan was found guilty on 7 counts and in November 2013 sentenced to 30 years in prison with 5 years of supervised release. Yet charges against McMillan continued to stack up. Always the entrepreneur, McMillan operated an urban clothing store in Southridge Mall, as well as Soft Bottom, a men's magazine. He dabbled in music, promoting his rap CD on the downtown Milwaukee billboard, claiming, quote, "I am Milwaukee," unquote, with his album, quote, "block tested and hood approved," unquote. Maintaining his entrepreneurial and rapper status, he posted various videos of himself counting up to $100,000. Yet his business ventures raised questions. How could his retail and magazine business produce such large quantities of capital? Was his music career really taking off? Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Wall would disagree. Reports found that McMillan was spending $6,000 on custom jewelry, $15,900 cash for a watch, and purchasing a $79,500 Bentley Continental GT, all while claiming he was unemployed, without income or assets, and never filing tax returns for his urban clothing store. On July 6, 2011, a search warrant was established, and police searched his home. Inside, they discovered a loaded handgun, an assault rifle, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, $94,600 in cash, and further evidence tying McMillan to a $325,000 protein supplement theft in Dallas, Texas. For his possession of illegal firearms in March 2014, McMillan was sentenced to an additional 77 months, and Attorney Wall won forfeiture of the custom watch and sought civil forfeitures of his $47,000 jewelry collection, Bentley, and cash found at his home. However, in September 2015, 15 years was trimmed from McMillan's sentence because of the judge's mistake in guidelines. He wrongfully assumed McMillan's charge guaranteed life instead of 30 to life, which was the correct penalty. Still, McMillan has 20 more years to serve. The next pimp to be charged was Sean D. Patrick. Armed robbery, grand larceny, and shootings are just a dent in the long list of criminal offenses Patrick acquired dating back to his teens. Why not add homicide and sex trafficking? I can't say what did him in exactly, but in mid-2011, Patrick was found guilty of the May 2010 murder of 31-year-old Joran Mason. As the story goes, Mason, a fellow pimp who'd just been released from prison after 5 years for soliciting sex workers, was urging Patrick's girls to work for him instead. The girls in turn told Patrick, who arrived outside of a self-serving laundromat with a 9mm and fired 8 times into Mason's vehicle. He was killed execution style. Patrick was arrested and pled guilty to second-degree reckless homicide and using a dangerous weapon. He received 20 years, but the charges didn't stop there. The then 37-year-old pled guilty October 2011 to 4 counts of conspiracy and sex trafficking of 3 children by force. Patrick's sex trade began in 2006, where he sought his sights on disadvantaged young girls from broken homes. Like the other men before him, Patrick promised the girls luxury and safety, then persuaded them into selling their bodies. For 5 nights a week, Patrick profited from the girls' dates. When money was short for the night, Patrick resorted to choking, slapping, punching, or beating them with belts, cords, high-heeled shoes, or bottles. His wrath also included stomping on their backs and having the girls have sex with his friends in public. But his reasons for punishment went beyond money. If the girls disobeyed his rules, acted disrespectfully, or missed the Greyhound bus, he would beat them. The girls either rode the bus or were transported by Patrick to the Chicago racetrack, occasionally chauffeuring them in a van with the words, "Ho Holler," on the front quarter panel. The van was something of a backdrop on occasion, as the girls posed naked in front of it for his peers to see. The girls also lived in cramped conditions, with 6 at a time sharing a single hotel room. Like McMillan, Patrick's finances were combed through and criticized for failing to pay taxes, as well as owing $150,000 in back child support for his 12 children. His lifestyle explored and his criminal history analyzed, Sean D. Patrick was sentenced to an additional 30 years. Last, at least in this video, is Derrick Avery. Some may know him as Pimp Snooki, a television pimp who appeared on Jerry Springer and starred in such documentaries as American Pimp and Pimps Up, Pose Down, while others know him as the man who manufactured a sex trafficking ring from Milwaukee to Las Vegas for 16 years, starting in 1994. Yet Avery insists he is not a pimp. Quote, "One day I'm going to have to explain to the world who is Pimp Snooki, and that day is coming. My face is on these videos, but that's not who Derrick Avery is. Pimp Snooki is a brand, like Pepsi or something," unquote. Victims of Avery's trafficking ring would disagree. One victim in particular was featured alongside him in Pimps Up, Pose Down and claimed he employed her from 2003 to 2004 in Las Vegas until she was arrested and left town. Upon her departure, Avery contacted her numerous times, threatening her life. Fearful, she filed a restraining order. But it wasn't until April 2009 that she came forward to the FBI, saying that Avery told her that if investigators asked, she was to say he wasn't a pimp. But the question simply is this: Was Derrick Avery a pimp at 4 a.m. in Mandalay Bay in 2007 when a woman in a barely there outfit walked by him and, instead of accepting her offer for sex, tried to persuade her to join his ring? He bragged about his riches and detailed all the things he could do for her within their 45-minute conversation, and when the air was clear, she signaled the undercover officers and arrested Avery. But this wasn't the first time Avery was caught in a sticky situation. 2 years prior in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, Officer John Molotsky found Avery with a woman and 2 hotel keys parked suspiciously near the Exile Inn. Inside the room was a supply of condoms and 4 women, 3 of whom had a history of prostitution. In June 2007, police were called to a home in North Las Vegas, and once again Avery and the same women were present. One of them confessed she was 17. Police didn't arrest Avery at that time, counting on the women to testify, and when they didn't, Avery became something of a ghost until his casino arrest. As time crept on, more charges and testimonies came to light, and the question of whether or not Derrick Avery was a pimp was slowly becoming clearer. The women Avery trusted most were set to train the new recruits. They taught the other girls Avery's rules, which included walking behind him with their head bowed and calling him daddy. They couldn't address other pimps or men unless they were clients, and each woman came with a quota. They had to earn thousands of dollars per night and forfeit it to Avery. Failure to comply involved violent beatings with fists, quote, wooden and metal brooms, pool cues, pans, chairs, and leather belts, slapping them in the face methodically back and forth with his rings facing inward, stomping and kicking them with his alligator shoes, and placing a phone book on their backs and striking it with a baseball bat, unquote. One of his most prominent workers was Shamika Evans. Articles describe Evans as Avery's top victim, meaning she was also his most trusted. Together, the pair were arrested on July 31, 2009, and while she trained others, she was also subjected to vicious beatings and scars that included Avery extinguishing a cigarette on her body. The 31-year-old faced charges of conspiracy to sex traffic and sat in jail for 10 months before she cooperated with FBI agents, Milwaukee police, and the IRS. The agencies and Evans spoke for 8 days, and it was her statements that helped seal Avery's fate. 3 years later, Evans pled guilty and was sentenced to time already served with 2 years probation and 20 hours of community service. A 2012 Milwaukee article said that Evans was working as a home health worker and was on the verge of losing her 3 children she birthed with Avery. She also was facing being labeled as a sex offender. I cannot say if she still works as a health provider or if she lost her children. There is a woman by her name registered as a sex offender as of 2010, but I do not know if this is the same woman. I can say that Evans was the only victim charged, but not the only mentioned. There was a 17-year-old runaway that Avery found at the Greyhound bus station in June 2004. He showed her immense compassion, providing comfort and clothing. He then took her ID and address book, and with hopefulness swirling in the young girl's mind, she began to prostitute for him in Chicago. But 2 months into the arrangement, the young girl realized Avery was not who she thought he was. He beat her with multiple items, including a broomstick, when she complained about moving to Las Vegas, and made a phone call offering $2,800 for her father's death. Another girl was 14 when she began her employment with Avery. She was required to earn $500 a day in Chicago and $1,000 a night in Vegas. She was prohibited from contacting her family and told to rob clients and move through them, quote, in the amount of time it takes to smoke a cigarette, unquote. Like the 17-year-old, the young 14-year-old was subjected to beatings and also engaged in what Avery called the hot or cold treatment. The hot treatment involved Avery pouring rubbing alcohol on a part of the girl's body and then setting it on fire, while the cold treatment had the girls in the ice-filled bathtub for, quote, the amount of time it took for a cigarette to burn down, unquote. After 5 years of work, the young teen was pregnant with Avery's child, one of 26 Avery had with multiple others. These are only 2 examples out of 7 witnesses who documented their life in a 26-page complaint against Avery. In November 2011, then 45-year-old Derrick Avery pled guilty to conspiracy to sex traffic by use of force and sex trafficking of a child by use of force, fraud, and coercion. His attorneys recommended a 10-year sentence, but then authorities filed a criminal complaint in Nevada accusing Avery of domestic violence and transportation of minors across state lines for commercial sex. These charges carried a life sentence. He was then sentenced to 20 years in prison in 2012. Despite the men listed, this is only a dent in the infamous sex trafficking arrest that circulated Milwaukee. There was 40-year-old Paul Kettering, who offered to pay a sex worker $50 if she found him an 8-year-old girl to have sex with. When arrested, officers found 270,000 images and 3,000 video files of child pornography with children as young as 2 on his computer. He was sentenced February 2011 to 7.5 years in prison, followed by 20 years probation. And then 34-year-old Amani Booker and 23-year-old Holly Arnold, who received 14 years and 1 year respectively for picking up a 14-year-old girl and exploiting her to men in a hotel. Booker gave her weed and took naked photos of her and advertised her on the internet as a 19-year-old new girl on the block. The ad received 2 hits from men who came to the hotel room, and unfortunately, there are many more cases beyond these. The Wisconsin Department of Justice, DOJ, requested additional funds for 2003 to 2015 for more positions in the Sexual Exploitation Task Force. Specifically, 3 special agents, 1 criminal analyst, and 1 senior criminal analyst. DOJ Communications Officer Dana Burrick listed 17 cities where child sex trafficking is at the most high, including Milwaukee, Green Bay, and Madison. In 2015, the Wisconsin DOJ and Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, DCF, created the Wisconsin Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force. 2 years later, the DOJ created the Human Trafficking Bureau. It was hard to pinpoint if human trafficking is occurring based on a single indicator. Here are a few of the warning signs. A person's body language, speech, or extracurriculars may appear to be closely controlled or monitored. They may work exclusively but receive hardly any compensation. They don't discuss work or the working conditions out of fear. They live with their co-workers in cramped quarters, and they have no way to contact their family or friends. Many pimps recruit their victims in the open, often using other women to help recruit. They fill the young woman or man's head with promises of wealth and lavishness, using a fancy job title to attract them, like a modeling agent, movie producer, or photographer. Pimps also use Facebook and other social media outlets, not just to advertise the girls they have for potential clients, but to attract potential victims. They use subtle language such as escort or sensual massage, and some go for it. Pimps and prostitutes may seem like a passing fad, but these things still exist. There are people out there right now trying to recruit, and there are people out there right now trying desperately to leave. If you or someone you know is or could be a victim of human trafficking, please call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888 or text HELP to be free. That is HELP to 233-733. Life after being a human trafficking victim varies, and each person is different. Some move on with their lives as best they can, while others find careers and paths similar to the ones they just left. But at the end of it all, at least they now have control over their own life. I'm Mr. True Crime, and remember to be kind, be loud, be aware. Hey, want to see these videos a day early? Check out my Patreon page for how, and maybe look over a few other perks while you're there. In the meantime, for more information about any of the cases listed, why not check out some of these awesome links? And if you like what you saw and heard today, why not drop a like and a comment? Maybe subscribe while you're here? I make new videos every Wednesday, and you won't miss what's in store.